This special television program by Life Issues Institute features America's top Black pro-life leaders who strive to alert the Black community that women of color are targeted by the abortion industry. Amazing individuals, each and every one. Arnold Culbreth is the Director of Urban Outreach for Protecting Black Life, a project of Life Issues Institute. Its goal is to provide education, resources, and strategies to combat the problem of abortion in the Black community. I sat down with Arnold at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, to talk about the link between the Black pro-life movement and the Underground Railroad.
Well, just as the abolitionists of yesteryear worked hard to free the slaves from the bondage of slavery, pregnancy help centers every day, one woman at a time, one conversation at a time, are helping to prevent women from being enslaved or ensnared by abortion. But if they've been subjected to abortion, they work to help free them from that bondage that abortion brings. God says in the book of Hosea 4:6, that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. One of the major reasons the Black community is being annihilated by abortion is because of lack of knowledge. I travel 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a month somewhere in the nation or nations addressing this issue. Roughly 90% of the African Americans I talk to don't know it's the leading cause of death. Most pastors say, where has this information been? Why didn't I know about this? And then the next reaction is, what can I do about it?
Kathryn Davis is the founder and president of the Restoration Project. It works to inform, educate, and activate people on the impact of America's public policy and culture on Black life. As a young woman, Kathryn was the victim of 2 abortions. After years of regret, she was finally able to find healing through God and by getting involved in the pro-life movement.
1987, I went to a Bible study, and this particular Tuesday, they were talking about abortion. And at the end of that teaching, I was literally paralyzed in my guilt, and I could not move. The only thing I could do was just sit there and cry. And I was trying to process through my brain, okay, can God ever forgive me for what I did? Because at that point, I couldn't forgive myself. And I have some of the most caring, wonderful pastors in the world, and they recognized immediately what was happening and what I was going through. And then Bishop Boone gave me the book, Grand Illusions, and said, read this and go do something about it. After I read Grand Illusions and got introduced to Margaret Sanger's Negro Project, I began to do research to say, well, is this working? Because in 1973, when Roe v. Wade was decided, my mom and I were talking about it, and she laughed, and she said, there's not a Black woman in America that would ever kill her baby that way, given our history. And so I wanted to see, can I still say that what my mom said, or had it changed? And I began to look at the numbers, and the more I looked at the numbers, the more that I saw that not only were we getting the abortions, but the numbers were lopsided. We are at genocide, and I believe it's genocidal by design. I like to say Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers are spitting in our face and calling it rain when they say that there's no racial impetus to it. I know the difference between spit and rain, and there is a racial impetus, and it is decimating the Black community today.
As a young boy, Ryan Bomberger was adopted into a large family that included 3 biological children and 10 adopted children. From a young age, he was taught about the value of life and human dignity. And at 13 years old, Ryan learned about a piece of his history that further strengthened these values.
You could say it wasn't exactly planned. I was born as a result of something that is so horrific and so violent. I'm the 1%, you could say, that is used to justify 100% of abortions. My biological mother had been raped, and yet she had the incredible courage to go through 9 months of a traumatic pregnancy and give me life. And not only just give me life, but give me a great life. And all I really wanted to do is to thank her. Really, I don't need to have a relationship with her, but I wanted to know how deeply grateful I am that she gave me life.
Ryan started the Radiance Foundation as an outlet to use his multimedia talents for the pro-life movement. His goal for the foundation is to be a resource for the pro-life movement by creating unified messaging that can be used by multiple groups. Ryan feels there's a significant problem in the media of choosing advocacy over accuracy, and he hopes the stories he's sharing can overcome this bias.
When I think of mainstream media today, I can't help but think of one of my childhood heroes, Frederick Douglass. And at that time, mainstream media wasn't telling the truth about slavery. And so what did he do? He went and started his own publication, the North Star, because he knew there was an injustice happening, and he, as he said, he couldn't be quiet about it. And so we have mainstream media today whose bias, I mean, I don't know, can you say bias? I mean, their complete and utter advocacy of abortion is more than transparent. And unfortunately, the public suffers from it because we don't get the truth about the abortion industry. We don't get the truth about the 56 million who have died since Roe. We don't get the truth about what abortion does to human lives, not just the unborn child, but to women and men. And that's the mainstream media's role. They're supposed to inform. They're supposed to try to be objective. And when you have, for instance, you know, the Gannett Foundation that runs USA Today or New York Times Foundation that directly donate to Planned Parenthood, you're not going to get journalism without extreme bias.
It's kind of ironic that the National Association of Black Journalists also support an organization like Planned Parenthood that was basically founded to curtail their population.
It's amazing. When you look at human history, it's perplexing to see how someone goes from a position of being the oppressed to the oppressor. And when you talk about the National Association of Black Journalists, they actually have received, if you look at Planned Parenthood's 990, I think from a year or two ago, Planned Parenthood directly donated to this journalistic association. What amazes me is how racism is seen in every institution in America by many of these journalists and many so-called black leaders, but not in the one industry that kills for a living.
Dean Nelson works to equip pro-life candidates as chairman of the board for the Frederick Douglass Foundation. He spent years serving with CareNet and helping to plant more pregnancy centers in urban communities. Like the Underground Railroad, Dean sees pregnancy centers as an integral network to reaching the Black community and getting the church involved with the fight.
One of the things that I saw with pregnancy centers was an easy way for the church, and particularly the African American church, to become engaged. At CareNet, we saw a number of organizations, organizational leaders from the Black community that really saw this approach to helping women through establishing new pregnancy centers.
What role do you think the church should play in addressing the issue of abortion in the Black community?
I'm reminded of Martin Luther King Jr., who said that, you know, the church must be reminded that it is not the master nor the servant of the state, but it is the conscience of the state. And if the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it becomes an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority. I believe that the church has the ability to have that voice, the conscience of the nation, to speak to issues like slavery, like civil rights, but particularly this issue, which I believe is a human rights issue. It is a civil rights issue of our day.
The church is a sleeping giant on this issue, not just the Black church, the Anglo church and other churches as well. But rather than lagging, the church needs to be leading. So we're working hard to reach pastors and their congregants to share critical information with them to wake them up on this issue.
What effect do you think there'd be if the pastors of all faiths really gave attention to the issue of abortion throughout America?
Well, if they did, I'm confident that we could end it. And as we speak about Black ministers in particular, Margaret Sanger and her Negro Project of 1939 was key at influencing Black pastors in order to infiltrate the Black community. And I'm convinced that that back door that's been opened at Pandora's box to the Black community by the watchmen of yesteryear is supposed to be closed by the watchmen of today.